Welcome to the Debt Matters Podcast, where we help Canadians find solutions to their debt with licensed insolvency trustees from across Canada. I'm Wayne Kay. Today, we've got a great discussion about financial intimacy and how to talk to your partner about money. Joining me to discuss this, Francine Myers from Allen Marshall and Associates, licensed insolvency trustee with offices in Alberta, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. Francine, thanks for coming back to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Wayne.
We have great discussions when you're here, and this one I think is wonderful because unfortunately, couples get together and they don't have the same thoughts when it comes to money.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? When I got married, when I got engaged, my wife had told me at that point, you better be debtless. And if you're not, you're selling the motorcycle and you're selling that toy and you're coming in here, you know, debt free.
I like her already.
Everybody seems to like her. So that was it. So she had a plan, and that was, and I'm glad we did, right? So once again, she had a financial plan, was thinking about that stuff when I was thinking about toys. So this is a common thing that's been happening for years and years.
Yeah, it definitely has. You know, how I approach this, I want to make sure, first of all, I say to people, okay, what are your financial habits? What are your values? People, you ask them that question, they don't even really understand what it means. So I kind of break it down and I said, okay, what's important to you, right? Is it things like security, freedom, you know, flexibility or spontaneity? Is it being altruistic, giving to others? Is it living simply? There's a minimalist, movement. If you hadn't noticed, you know, the tiny home, everybody's heard about that. Mm-hmm. What are your values? What do you want to do with your money? What does financial success mean to you? It can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, right? Mm-hmm. How do you feel about saving? How do you feel about spending, right? Do you know where your money comes from? Where does it go? And here's an interesting one. What does budgeting do? Does it make you feel in control or does it make you feel controlled, right? So that's always when I kind of sit down and say, well, let's kind of figure out what your habits and values for. So once you've identified, and you would do this, you know, your own exercise as well, because a lot of people have not actually sat down and thought about this, right? Once you identify your own financial values, if, unlike you and your spouse, you have not taught your children and discussed this, you know, from being toddlers, which most people have not, it's a really new exercise for most people. Mm-hmm. You've got to identify your financial values that really kind of underpin your psyche. Say, you know, you have to improve your ability to set and achieve goals. You'll find it much easier to, you know, prioritize, budget, save, and you'll just feel better about money all, you know, as you go along and investing, what have you. If you can't talk about or think about money yourself, you're not going to be able to really talk about finances with someone else. You have to figure out yourself where you sit with everything. And you always remember, people are very different, right?
But I think she's really awesome. I really like her. Right? There's always that side. It's like, well, but
my God.
Well, but
I can't believe you said that. That's exactly what was crossing my mind, right? Love is all we need.
That's all we need. Exactly. We'll get through it.
Why? Yes. Why do I need to talk about money? Right? Okay. So let's talk about a thing called the honeymoon stage, which you and I are probably out of at this point in time. Okay. And there's also a movie years ago, and I'm dating myself, with Marilyn Monroe, called The 7-Year Itch, for good reason, right? Here's what happens, right? You think the other person is wonderful. All you need is love. Well, that might work for the first few years. Maybe not even that long, right? There are little annoying financial habits of maybe not paying their credit card off all the time, or maybe going over a limit, or, you know, not paying the power bill on time, or, you know, being a little bit spontaneous, which may be very attractive at the beginning, starts to wear thin after a while. Yeah. Right? When you're down to year 10, you're like, you know what, you can't handle money. And that's where the problems start. Right? Yep. Really, Wayne, you should have seen the signs, right? At the beginning. Right? When we don't want to really look at them because we're so in love, as you just said, right? But at the beginning, a young couple And, whether it's your child or, this is what I'm going to say to my child, and I would hope that people would say to their child, observe the other person. How do they handle money, right? Have a conversation with them about it, right? You have to have the hard conversations. What a lot of young people will do is just start off and fly by the seat of the pants. There's no plan.
No.
There's absolutely no plan, right? Because love is all we need, right? Yeah. But you really do need to talk about money as early on in a relationship as reasonably comfortable. I mean, you don't meet somebody and a week later start, ask about their RSP or anything, right? But, where it started, that might be a little bit too much, right?
You don't put that in the dating profile? Send RSP statements and taxes?
No, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. But, maybe some people should.
Maybe they should, yeah.
But you do want, when it's starting to get a little bit serious or, you move in together or something, or even before you move in together, you should be sitting down and talking about money, especially if you're starting to put your money together. Because again, the little habits that you're kind of okay with, if you're a saver and the other one's a spender, well, you're going to have problems 10 years down the road, or even 5 years down the road, if you don't compromise. Now, I do meet people who, totally squeak when they walk. Mm-hmm. And then I meet people who, money burns a hole in their pocket. It might be good if they each temper each other a little bit.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's okay to spend money. It's okay.
That's right.
If you have it. And that's what we're living for. So it's perfectly fine. But
it's okay, but right. Yeah. It's okay as long as the bills are paid and the priorities are taken care of. And when you are, 25 years old, now's the time to start thinking about retirement, not 45. Okay. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. Any time is the good time. When's the best time to plant an oak tree? 20 years ago. When's the second best time? Today.
Right.
Right. So as soon as you realize it, you start. But it's much better if you started talking about this years ago. What's the two things? I'm going to ask you a question, Wayne. What's the two things you think that couples fight about the most?
I'm going to say, well, money will definitely be there. Mm-hmm. And probably got to have something to do with sex.
Could be. Spoken like a true man. I was thinking more kids, but you know what?
Kids. Well, they were because of that, so I guess I'm right.
There you go. But you know what? That's true too. I hadn't put that on my repertoire, but you're absolutely right. Right?
But I'm an evolved man who's done a lot of training, and so I will say the fight is actually not about sex. It's about something different, which is probably regarding the kids or the other life situations that are going on. So kids and money, big fights, okay? Yeah.
Big fights and power, right?
Power struggle regarding over who's in control?
When the power struggles, exactly. When the power struggles come up a lot, it's butting heads on parenting styles, because everybody's different, and how to spend money, okay? No matter who you are, you're going in a couple, you got two adults, you're going to have conflict. That is normal. Show me a couple who knows how to deal with conflict. I'm not talking about, you're fighting, you're throwing, dishes around around the kitchen or anything, but a couple who understands the rules of engagement, because there's going to be engagement. Most conflicts are around, a lot of times, yes, the kids and money. You got to know how to talk about it. And if you've talked about it early on and you understand the framework, now nothing prepares you for kids and teenage years. I know that, right?
Yeah.
But if you've at least talked about money and you're on the same page, you've got a framework and you're working together towards a common goal, that will go a long way towards you also working together regarding the children, even if you think the husband is too hard on them and the husband thinks the wife is too soft on them, which is pretty typical because that's kind of how it boils down to, right?
Right.
It's a hard conversation talking about money. Like I said, especially if you didn't grow up with it, in your house. I would suggest to young couples, again, don't go in with the atom bomb. Go in with talking things like, are you a saver? How do you feel about money? Do you think that, money is a means to an end? Does money burn a hole in your pocket? There's no right or wrong because we're all learning and we will learn from each other. And it's a negotiation process. And you need to brainstorm with your partner, and both partners need to feel safe. And it should never turn into one session of one partner dictating to the other, the partner who makes sometimes the higher income, dictating to the other where the money will go, because that, Wayne, is a kiss of death on a relationship.
Absolutely. Now, Francine, you deal with couples all the time who run into financial trouble to a point where they're, they have to look at some serious options. Maybe it's consumer proposals, maybe it's bankruptcies, but oftentimes they're there together. Generalizing, is it something that you can say was because couples didn't talk about money, had totally different ideas? Does that happen? Are you seeing that?
Yes. So here's what happens typically. All right. So couple A and B come in. A was totally absent from dealing with any money, didn't want anything to do with it. And that could have been male or female. It really doesn't matter. Okay. That does happen because when you don't deal with it, you can't be responsible for it. Other B has been trying to keep things together and pay bills. But there hasn't been a lot of communication and a lot of talking. What will happen is the person who totally abdicated any responsibility will start blaming the other person. Well, if you were better with money, you handled the money. So if you'd been better, we wouldn't be here. That's absolutely not true. So, Wayne, I'm real frank with people because you need a get real moment, right?
Yep.
And it really comes down to, guys, you're here now. We need to put this behind us. And really, you can't blame him or her because you didn't help.
Right. You're both in it. Yeah.
Well, that's it. And that's exactly the point. So let's work together, go forward on how we deal with this and change the old money behaviors.
If there's a couple that's listening and maybe they are a little bit on opposite ends of the spectrum, is it ever advisable to you keep your accounts, I keep my accounts, we keep kind of everything separate, but yet live together? Or is it always better to be the team? Like my wife and I have everything just goes into one pot.
Either one will work for however a couple wants to handle it.
Okay.
The more traditional role is what you just mentioned. It goes into one pot, perhaps your wife, or traditionally it's the woman, actually, Wayne, right? Will pay the day-to-day bills, keep track of that, right? Traditionally, that is the way it does work. A lot of times when you see two professionals coming together, or people who perhaps get together later in life, or people who've been through a bad relationship and do not want to have their income compromised again, right? They will keep very separate accounts in that, okay, I will pay the rent or the mortgage or what have you. You be responsible for, the groceries. And they try to split it down the middle. That does work for some people. And then your own money is your own money. It makes sure that the bills are paid. Now, the problem with this is sometimes some people, don't pay the power bill and the other person doesn't know. So, there's pros and cons for everything.
Right.
That is a more uncommon way for people to handle their money. I find it with people who have come together later in life and are more independent anyway, right? Yep. Traditionally, it is done where you put everything together and then you work together. That can have its problems as well when you have one person handling the money that way, right? Mm-hmm. Because the other person may not know what is going on, right? So it has to be, I think the best, this is just my personal opinion, I think, yes, the one person should be handling the day-to-day and paying the bills. Because if not, it gets very confusing. Well, did you pay the power bill? No, I thought you did, right? That's not a good way to do it. You're responsible for paying the bills. And as long as the person accepts the responsibility, doesn't feel beat upon, that's great. Okay, that works out really well. But for larger purchases, right? So you should never, what's happened to me one time in a previous relationship, you should never come home and find a new car in the driveway.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. No kidding.
Not a good scene. So that's a couple of things. not discussing big purchases with your spouse, showing a lack of respect for the other person's opinion, and really making a purchase that's probably going to affect both people because now you've got this extra payment that the other didn't expect, right? So large purchases like that should always be discussed, right? And come to a compromise, right?
Yeah. There's a surprise.
It's a hard conversation.
Yeah,
it's a hard conversation.
Yeah, you can see from both sides. Somebody wanted to do something really nice, but it's such a big financial thing that it's like, you have to discuss it and still, hey, when you work for something and save up for it and you buy it, there's still that joy and happiness regarding it as opposed to just going out and getting the instant gratification and then having to pay for it after.
That's exactly the way it is. And I got to tell you, it's all this impulse spending, right? Saving up for something and then buying it, or even financing a portion, but having a big down payment gives you a much more gratification and a feeling of self-sufficiency than just charging it or just financing everything.
Yeah. Even smaller things, right? You don't have to have it all right now, so it's all good. Here's a question. As a parent, as you have kids then become getting into relationships, and then, we don't quite know what maybe the relationship is, what their financial states are. Do I say, here's a financial book, I'd like you both to read it? How does a parent approach a young couple getting, to that point where they need to discuss money?
I think that's a very slippery slope, perhaps, if it isn't approached properly.
Yeah.
Because you want to ensure that your child is autonomous and makes their way through life and not keep parenting them. But you put yourself, I would say, as not parent, but you're the consultant.
Okay.
At that point. So that's what we say to I have one on the cusp of university, almost an adult, not a problem. Makes a lot of her own decisions. If we see she's going to gouge out an eye, we'll say something, right? But for the most part, kind of needs to make her own decision. Right. Kind of need to make a few bad decisions, like she says, as long as she doesn't, end up in a collar or something, it's all good, right? Yeah. But we see our role kind of evolving now from parent to consultant. And I think if you kind of approach your children and say, or, teach them, say, look, yes, we are your parents, but now we come alongside you, not as a parent, but as older, wiser people, right? Yeah. Who have your best interests at heart and would like to just give you of our experience. You don't have to take our advice.
Yeah.
It is totally up to you. You are adults. But can we speak into your life? You have to be given permission to speak into another adult's life. If you don't, it will not go well.
That could almost be an entire show. Maybe we should schedule that one for kids getting ready for, leaving the nest, going off to school, going to university, going to start life, because I know a lot of parents who are in that place. And in fact, I was having a discussion with somebody today who said, I don't think my son will have any clue of how to take care of anything financially. And she was quite nervous because he says, well, like they did a calculation. They said, well, your gas is this, your cell phone is this, your insurance is this, but you're only making this much. And he's like, oh, it's fine. I've got savings.
I think it's just somebody who has not quite understood because they've lived at home.
Right. Yeah. But
seems to me a very normal reaction for someone who hasn't really been out on their own and experienced the up and down of life. And that's where a parent, again, has to come alongside the child and say, yes, you could go into your savings, but if you do, here's what possibly could happen.
Yeah.
Now, and just explain the situation. And again, when children become adults, you have to respect them as adults. And if they don't want to take your advice and don't want you to speak into their life, you can't force them.
Okay, we're wrapping up financial intimacy, how to talk to your partner about money. This has been a wonderful discussion. We know we need to discuss it. I'd never actually heard about, financial values before, and to analyze those, if I go back in my mind to pre-marriage. I was thinking pre-med, pre-marriage. Wasn't even something I was really thinking of. So I think that's just great advice. What's your final words of advice for us?
Oh, just make sure you have the hard conversations. Don't be afraid to have them, because you know what? Those hard conversations is what brings people closer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know what? I think when you're on the same page, you achieve so much more.
100%.
Right. Francine, a pleasure as always. Thanks very much for being on the show.
100% again. Thanks, Wayne.
My guest today, Francine Myers, and you can schedule a free consultation with Alan Marshall and Associates, licensed insolvency trustee, through their website at wecanhelp.ca. And if you want to learn more, go there again, wecanhelp.ca. And that's it for today's Debt Matters podcast. If you know somebody that really needs to learn from these shows, please pass on our address and let them know about the show, and subscribe where you get your favorite podcast from. And of course, we always have things up on our website at debtmatters.ca. Thanks for listening.